A millionaire who never believed in love, an innocent young woman, and one first night that changed everything. What did she do to melt that heart of ice? Tell me, where are you watching from? If you want to discover this breathtaking story, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. You won't regret it. The grand ballroom glittered under the light of hundreds of crystals hanging from the ceiling like raindrops frozen in time. The guests, wrapped in silk and expensive perfumes, moved like chess pieces across the polished marble floor. Among them, Emily Parker felt like an intruder. Her borrowed dress, a deep blue that miraculously matched her eyes, was slightly too big in the shoulders. The shoes, also borrowed, pinched in a way that made each step an exercise in self-control. Sometimes the most transformative encounters happen when we are least prepared for them, she thought as she scanned the luxurious Plaza Hotel ballroom in New York City, not knowing that this night would mark the beginning of a story that would challenge everything she believed she knew about love and its complicated paths. At 21, Emily possessed that rare combination of innocence and wisdom that only comes from observing life attentively. Her hands, slightly rough from working with flowers in her small shop in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, held a glass of champagne she had barely tasted. The sweet scent of the azaleas she had been arranging that morning still lingered on her fingers, a reminder of the world to which she truly belonged. "Bored?" The deep voice behind her startled her. When she turned, she found herself looking into grey eyes that observed her with a mixture of amusement and curiosity. Michael Thompson was 45 and had a presence that made the people around him seem faded. His black suit, perfectly tailored, contrasted with his salt-and-pepper hair combed back neatly. There was something in his posture, a contained tension, as if he were perpetually on the defensive. "Not bored," Emily replied, holding his gaze with a frankness that disconcerted Michael. "Just out of place." "In that case, there are two of us," he said, moving a little closer. "All these people with their social masks, playing the roles they think they should play. Predictable and tedious." Emily studied him for a moment, noticing how his smile didn't reach his eyes. "You're wearing a mask too," she finally said. "The difference is that yours is made of wounded pride, and it must weigh much more than all the others combined." The impact of her words was immediate. Michael Thompson, the man who had built a real estate empire along the East Coast, who had turned pain into power and distrust into a life philosophy, was momentarily speechless. And then something happened that no one who knew him would have predicted. He laughed, a genuine, deep laugh that echoed across the room and drew surprised glances. "Are you always this direct with strangers?" he asked, when he could catch his breath. "Only with those who need to hear the truth," she replied, and for the first time that night she truly smiled. Under the sparkling lights of that ballroom, amidst the elegant murmur of New York high society, something impossible to stop had begun. Like the first green shoot that emerges between cracks in the asphalt, defying all logic and obstacles. A connection that, without either of them knowing yet, would test every certainty and every wound in their hearts. The flower shop Bloom and Willow occupied a small storefront on a sunny corner of Williamsburg. Terracotta pots lined the entrance, creating a threshold of colors and aromas that invited passers-by to stop. For Emily, this space was much more than a business. It was her sanctuary, a place where each flower told a story and where her hands could create beauty from nature itself. She was finishing an arrangement of white narcissus when the shop bell rang. She didn't look up immediately, concentrated on adding the final touches. "Just a moment, please," she said, carefully placing a stem of eucalyptus to add texture. "I have all the time in the world." That deep voice made her look up abruptly. Michael Thompson was standing before the counter, a black coat over his shoulders and an indecipherable expression on his face. It had been exactly 2 weeks since the event at the plaza, where they had talked for hours about flowers, art, and the peculiar way people build walls to protect themselves. "Mr. Thompson," Emily said, surprised. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Michael, please," he corrected, observing the small but vibrant shop with interest. "I was passing through the neighborhood and remembered you mentioned your flower shop." It was a lie, and they both knew it. Nobody just happened to be passing through a neighborhood that was a 40-minute drive from his usual haunts, especially not a man like him, who rarely strayed from the exclusive circles where his surname opened all doors. "I need an arrangement," he continued, feigning casual indifference. "For someone special." Emily nodded, wiping her hands on the green apron she wore. "What kind of person are they? Each flower conveys a different message." Michael hesitated for a moment. "Someone authentic, a person who sees the world as it really is, not how it should be." Their gazes met for a moment, loaded with meaning. "And what do you want to convey with this gift?" she asked, though something inside her already anticipated the answer. "Admiration," he said, and then added in a lower voice, "and perhaps a bit of gratitude for having shaken my world." Emily felt an unexpected warmth rising up her neck. She took a deep breath and, with a professionalism that contradicted her inner turmoil, began to move among the flower buckets. "White lilies," she explained, selecting the most perfect ones. "They symbolize purity of intention." Then she added some deep red roses. "And these, to remind you that passion and life exist even in the most guarded hearts." Michael's gaze followed her movements, fascinated by the natural grace with which she worked. Between her hands, what had been just a collection of scattered flowers transformed into a harmonious composition that seemed to tell a story. "It's perfect," he said when she finished. "How much do I owe you?" Emily calculated the price, conscious that for him any amount would be insignificant. $80, she said, without applying any special discount. Her dignity wouldn't allow it. Michael paid with a $100 bill and refused the change. When she handed him the arrangement, their fingers brushed briefly. "May I ask who it's for?" she said, though something inside her already knew. "For you," he responded, returning the arrangement to her hands. "An excuse to see you again." The sincerity of his confession left her momentarily speechless. It wasn't the gesture itself, but the vulnerability it implied that moved her. This man who could buy entire buildings had gone to the trouble of inventing an excuse to see her, risking rejection. "You could have just invited me to dinner," she finally said, accepting the flowers with a smile. "I will. Tomorrow, if you're available." And so, between the perfume of lilies and roses, the first seed was planted of what would become a bond, as unlikely as it was deep. As Michael left the shop, Emily stood contemplating the floral arrangement she now held in her hands. A gift that, without her knowing yet, symbolized the beginning of a journey that would transform her life in ways she could never have imagined. Per Se Restaurant gleamed with its subdued, elegant lighting, a sanctuary of exclusivity in the heart of Manhattan. The Michelin stars it boasted were reflected in every detail, from the perfectly polished crystal to the respectful silence that floated between the tables, interrupted only by discreet murmurs and the occasional clink of silverware on fine china. Emily observed everything with curious eyes as the sommelier served a red wine that, according to Michael, had notes of black cherry and vanilla that slowly bloomed on the palate. The wine cost more than her monthly rent, a thought she tried to push away to avoid feeling overwhelmed. "Do you like it?" Michael asked, studying her reaction. "It's beautiful," she replied, referring to the place. "But I wonder if people come here for the food, or to be able to say they've been." Michael smiled. That unfiltered honesty was precisely what he found refreshing about her. A bit of both, I suppose. Some places don't just sell food, they sell status. Like expensive flowers, Emily reflected, people pay more for imported roses than for local daisies, even though the latter can be equally beautiful. Dinner progressed with conversations that jumped from light topics to deep reflections with surprising naturalness. She told him about her passion for flowers, how each had its own language, and how she had learned this silent idiom from her grandmother. He told her about his real estate projects, but carefully avoided any mention of his personal life. As the night advanced, however, Emily began to feel the weight of the invisible walls Michael had built around himself. Each time she approached a personal topic, he skillfully diverted the conversation. "Why are you here with me, Michael?" she finally asked when they were served dessert, an elaborate creation that seemed more a work of art than something edible. The question caught him off guard. "Because I enjoy your company. There are dozens of women in New York with whom you could enjoy an evening, women from your world with whom you'd have more in common than a florist who lives in a 50-square-meter apartment and shares it with 2 roommates." Michael set down his glass and looked at her directly, with an intensity that made the noise of the restaurant seem to fade away. "Precisely because of that. Because you're not from my world. Because when I'm with you, I'm not the businessman or the rich man everyone wants to please. I'm just a man." Emily held his gaze, searching in those grey eyes for any sign of falsehood. She found none. I don't know if that's a compliment or a reminder that we belong to different realities. Perhaps both, he answered, and for a brief instant his mask of security seemed to crack, revealing a vulnerability that disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. The following week, it was Emily who set the terms of their meeting. She took him to a small gastropub in the East Village, where the tables were so close together that diners' elbows almost touched. The wine was served in simple glasses, not elegant crystal, and the lively murmur of conversations made it impossible to speak in whispers. "Do you come here often?" Michael asked, clearly out of his element, but making an effort to adapt. "At least once a week," she replied, as she spread a paper napkin across her lap. "The burgers are the best in the city, and the owner, Joe, has known my family for years." As if summoned, a man in his 60s with a thick mustache and a stained apron approached the table. His eyes lit up when he saw Emily. "My little flower girl," he exclaimed, embracing her affectionately. "Who's your friend?" he added, looking at Michael with barely disguised curiosity. "Michael Thompson," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "A pleasure to meet you." Joe shook his hand firmly, sizing him up with the experienced eye of someone who had seen all types pass through his bar. "Take good care of our Emily," he said, in a tone that sounded more like a warning than a friendly request. "She's a treasure, this girl." "I know," Michael replied with seriousness. When Joe walked away to bring them the house specials, no need to ask, Michael observed Emily with a new perspective. Here, in this lively corner of New York, she was in her element. Her laughter flowed freely. She greeted other customers and even helped a couple of lost tourists decipher the handwritten menu. "You're different here," he commented, as they shared a plate of truffle fries with spicy aioli. "Not different," she corrected. "Just complete. We are who we are in the places where we feel safe to be ourselves." That night, walking through the narrow streets of the East Village, with the distant sound of a jazz saxophone floating in the air, Michael felt something in his interior beginning to thaw. An invisible but resilient wall was starting to crack. What neither of them knew was that the first real test of their connection was about to present itself, in the form of an unexpected visit to the small flower shop in Williamsburg. Noon fell over New York with a relentless sun that made the sidewalks shine. In the flower shop, Emily was spraying the hydrangeas with fresh water when the door opened. The woman who entered was about 30, wore an impeccable suit, and heels that resonated with authority on the wooden floor. Her black hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her eyes, a familiar shade of grey, scanned the place with a mixture of curiosity and barely disguised disdain. "Can I help you?" Emily asked, drying her hands on her apron. "I'm Jessica Thompson," the woman introduced herself without extending her hand. "Michael's daughter." Emily's heart skipped a beat. For the past 3 months, she and Michael had been seeing each other regularly, creating a routine that alternated between their worlds: dinners at exclusive restaurants and walks through popular markets, afternoons at his private beach house in the Hamptons, and mornings collecting flowers at wholesale markets. "A pleasure to meet you," Emily responded, trying to maintain a cordial tone despite Jessica's evident hostility. "Your father has mentioned you." "I doubt as much as he's talked about you at family gatherings," Jessica replied, inspecting with apparent interest an arrangement of tulips. "Although, of course, it's not the first time my father has gotten enthusiastic about someone considerably younger." Emily took a deep breath, refusing to rise to the provocation. "Is there something I can help you with? Perhaps a floral arrangement?" Jessica smiled, a gesture that didn't reach her eyes. "Actually, I've come to make you a proposal," she said, opening her elegant briefcase and extracting an envelope. $50,000 for you to stay away from my father." The silence that followed was as dense as fog. Emily looked at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. "Does your father know you're here?" she finally asked. "My father has a history of making disastrous emotional decisions when it comes to personal relationships," Jessica responded, avoiding the question. "As his daughter and business partner, I have the responsibility to protect both his emotional well-being and our family interests." Emily took a step back, as if needing physical distance from that proposal. "I'm not with Michael for money." "They all say the same thing at the beginning." Jessica let out a tired sigh. "Look, I don't judge you. You're young. He's an attractive and rich man. It's a simple equation. But spare everyone the drama and time. Take the money, disappear, and let my father recover from the spell before this goes too far. Emily felt a mixture of indignation and sadness, not for the offer itself, but for what it revealed. The profound distrust that must exist in that family, the impossibility they saw in someone wanting Michael for who he was, not for what he possessed. "I'm sorry you made this trip for nothing," she said firmly, though her voice trembled slightly. "I won't accept your money, and I think you should leave now." Jessica didn't seem surprised, as if she had anticipated this response. "You're deceiving yourself if you think this has a future," she said, tucking the envelope away. "He will return to his world, and you to yours. It's just a matter of time." When the door closed behind Jessica, Emily allowed herself to sit, her legs suddenly weak. An uncomfortable doubt settled in her mind. Did Michael know about this visit? Was this a strategy they had used before? The classic good cop, bad cop. The seed of distrust had been planted, and Emily found herself wondering how well she really knew the man she was beginning to love. That night, when Michael called to confirm their dinner for the next day, Emily was tempted to mention Jessica's visit, but something held her back. What if it was a test? What if Jessica was acting on her own? She decided to wait, observe, allow time to reveal the true intentions of both Thompsons. What she didn't know was that this decision would trigger a series of events that would test not only the trust between them, but the true nature of what they were building together. The car glided along the winding coastal road like an elegant predator. Through the window, Emily contemplated how the Atlantic changed shades under the setting sun, turquoise near the shore, indigo in the depths. Michael drove in silence, his hands firm on the wheel of that Aston Martin which, he had told her, was his first great indulgence when his real estate company took off. "You never told me exactly where we're going," she commented, breaking the silence that had settled between them since leaving Manhattan. "My house in the Hamptons," he replied, giving her a brief glance. "I thought it was time to show you a more personal part of my life." Emily's heart skipped a beat. 4 months after their first meeting at that gala event, this was the first time Michael had invited her to his private space. Until now, their meetings had been at restaurants, walks through the city, or at her small apartment, where Michael sat uncomfortably on the worn sofa, while she prepared pasta with Miles Davis playing in the background. When they finally arrived, Emily held her breath. The house, if such an impressive structure could be called that, seemed to emerge directly from the cliff. It was an architectural masterpiece of glass, steel, and white concrete, with clean lines and impossible angles that defied gravity. Through the enormous windows, one could see the sea stretching to the horizon. "It's impressive," she murmured, as Michael guided her to the entrance. The interior was even more surprising. Minimalist spaces decorated with select pieces of contemporary art, floors of Italian marble that reflected the light streaming in abundantly, and a floating staircase that seemed suspended in air. Everything was beautiful, elegant, and perfectly orchestrated, and completely cold. Emily walked slowly through the main room, noting the details. There were no personal photographs, no objects that told stories, not even plants to bring life. It was like an art gallery or a page from a design magazine, perfect, untouchable, and uninhabited. "It seems like a mausoleum," she said without thinking, and immediately regretted her frankness. Michael, who was serving 2 glasses of white wine in the integrated kitchen, stopped short. "Excuse me?" Emily bit her lip, but it was too late to retract. "It's beautiful, but it doesn't seem like a home. There's nothing that tells who you are." Michael handed her a glass in silence and led her to the terrace overlooking the sea. The sun was beginning its descent, tinting the sky with dramatic oranges and purples. "Perhaps because for a long time I haven't wanted to be anyone in particular," he finally said, leaning against the railing. "Just the successful businessman, the calculating investor. It's safer that way." Emily approached him, feeling the salty breeze on her face. "Safe from what?" "From this," he answered, gesturing vaguely between them. "From feeling, from hoping, from believing that someone can see beyond my bank account." There was a long silence, full of unspoken words. The sea beat rhythmically against the rocks beneath the terrace. "What happened to you, Michael?" she asked softly. "Who hurt you so badly?" He took a long sip of wine before answering. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded different, stripped of its usual control. I married young at 30. I believed I had found true love. A bitter smile curved his lips. Amanda was intelligent, beautiful, passionate. Or so I thought. After 2 years together, I discovered that it had all been an elaborate performance. She was with my best friend. They had been laughing at me behind my back for months, and the worst part wasn't the betrayal itself, but discovering that she had never loved me. That every "I love you" had been a calculated lie to access my growing fortune. Emily felt a knot in her throat. Suddenly, many things made sense. Michael's distrust, his emotional walls, Jessica's visit to her shop. "I'm so sorry," she said, placing her hand on his. Michael looked at their joined hands as if the gesture surprised him. "I promised myself I would never be so naive again. I built all this," he gestured towards the house, "not as a home, but as a fortress. A place where I could be alone with my successes, not depending on anyone. And yet you brought me here today," Emily observed. He looked at her then, really looked at her, with an intensity that made the air between them seem to vibrate. "Because with you, for the first time in 15 years, I find myself wanting to tear down my own walls, and that terrifies me." That confession, so simple and so profound, changed something fundamental between them. Emily understood that he wasn't just sharing his house with her, but something much more valuable and fragile, his truth. They stayed in silence, watching as the sun sank into the horizon, painting the sky crimson and gold. They didn't need more words at that moment. The first step toward true intimacy had been taken. The walls hadn't fallen, but now they had a door. What neither of them could imagine was how difficult it would be to keep that door open in the coming days, when Michael's past would return to test everything they were building. The office of Thompson Investments occupied the top floor of an elegant building on Fifth Avenue. Through the windows, New York City stretched out like a living tapestry, with the Empire State Building rising like a stone giant in the distance. David Miller contemplated that view as he waited for Michael to finish a phone call. As a partner and friend for more than 20 years, he knew Michael better than anyone, or at least that's what he had believed until now. "Sorry for the delay," Michael said, finally hanging up. "The Italians always find a way to complicate even the simplest contract." David turned, studying his friend with an evaluative look. There was something different about him. Small details that others wouldn't notice. His tie knot slightly loosened, a smile that appeared for no apparent reason, fewer tension wrinkles around his eyes. "You look good, Michael," he commented, taking a seat in front of the mahogany desk. "Almost happy. Must be the first time in years I've used that word to describe you." Michael snorted, but didn't deny the observation. "The Milan report?" he asked, trying to steer the conversation toward professional territory. "It can wait," David responded, crossing his legs. "I'd rather you tell me about her." "Her? The florist, Emily, the woman who's achieving what neither your therapist nor I have managed in 15 years, making you seem human again." Michael reclined in his chair, considering what to answer. David had been there throughout the whole disaster with Amanda. It had been he who, one October night, found him in his office, completely drunk, contemplating the divorce papers, with the empty gaze of someone who has lost faith in everything. "She's different," he said finally. "Different good or different concerning?" David pressed. "Different authentic," Michael answered, and for the first time in their conversation, smiled openly. "It's as if she grew up in a parallel world, where people say what they think, feel what they say, and aren't afraid to be exactly who they are." David nodded slowly. For someone who had spent decades in the business world, where every gesture was calculated and every word measured, that must seem almost alien. "And you believe her?" "That's the problem, David." Michael stood up, walking to the window. "I believe her. And I don't know if it's because she really is that transparent, or because I want to believe her so desperately that I'm blinding myself. I investigated her," David confessed, and before Michael could protest, he quickly added, "as a precaution, out of friendship." Michael visibly tensed. "And?" "Emily Parker, 21 years old, lost her father at 12, lives with her mother and younger brother in Bedford-Stuyvesant, botany student at NYU, dropped out in her second year when her mother fell ill to work full-time at the flower shop. No significant debts, no known boyfriends in the last 2 years. Her last relationship was with a medical student who left to do his residency in Chicago." Michael listened in silence with an indecipherable expression. In summary, David concluded, a normal girl with a normal life. No big secrets, no great material ambitions. As far as I can see, she has no hidden motive for being with you beyond really liking you. A sigh of relief escaped Michael's lips, a sound so sincere that David couldn't help but smile. You know, Jessica is worried, he added, slightly changing his tone. She believes this is another Amanda in the making. Jessica is always worried, Michael replied dryly, and she has no right to interfere in my personal life. She went to see her. At the flower shop. Michael froze, his expression transforming into a mask of disbelief that quickly gave way to anger. She did what? She offered her money to leave you. A heavy silence fell over the office. When Michael spoke again, his voice was dangerously controlled. When? 2 weeks ago. Michael closed his eyes, making a quick mental calculation. 2 weeks. Just before he took Emily to his house in the Hamptons, just before he opened up emotionally as he hadn't done in years. And she hadn't said a word about Jessica's visit. Emily didn't accept, David continued. She didn't even consider the offer, according to what Jessica told me. And she also hasn't mentioned it to you from what I can see. No, she hasn't. Don't you find that significant? Another in her place would have used that information to create drama, to confront you with your daughter, to demonstrate her virtue. She simply let it go. Michael processed this new information, recalibrating everything he thought he knew about Emily. It wasn't just her honesty that had captivated him, but also her discretion, her capacity not to add more conflict to an already complex situation. I need to talk to Jessica, he finally said. This can't happen again. And with Emily, David added. She deserves to know that you had nothing to do with that visit. Michael nodded, suddenly grateful to have David as a friend and confidant. He had expected skepticism, even opposition, but instead had found understanding. I never thought I'd see you like this again, David commented, standing up to leave. Falling in love. I'm not. Michael began to deny out of reflex, but stopped. I don't know, David. I don't know what this is. I just know that when I'm with her, the world seems less cynical, and that scares me more than any high-risk investment we've ever made. Fear is a good sign, David replied, with an affectionate smile. It means you have something valuable to lose, for the first time in a long time. As David walked away, Michael remained contemplating the city. The afternoon sun drew golden flashes from the windows of the buildings, creating the illusion that New York was on fire with a magical light. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine a future not solely defined by acquisitions and contracts, but by shared moments. A future where the crystal walls of his fortress would be replaced by something more fragile, but infinitely more valuable: trust. What he didn't know was that this future was about to be tested in ways he had never anticipated, forcing him to decide once and for all if he was willing to risk everything for one last chance at true love. Rain fell relentlessly over New York, turning the streets into fleeting rivers and umbrellas, into colorful mushrooms moving hurriedly. Inside Bloom and Willow, Emily contemplated with a defeated expression the letter she had just received. The paper, with its official letterhead and impersonal tone, confirmed what she already feared. The rent for the location would double starting next month, an impossible sum for the modest business she had inherited from her grandmother. Sarah, her friend and occasional helper in the shop, read over her shoulder. Can they do that, just like that, without more notice? Technically, they are giving notice, Emily replied, placing the letter on the counter. The contract expires in 6 weeks. They're within their rights. But it's crazy. Nobody can pay double all of a sudden. That's precisely the point. They don't want to renew my contract, but they also don't want to be the villains who kick out the little florist from the neighborhood. So they set an impossible price and force me to leave voluntarily. The tinkling of the bell interrupted their conversation. Michael entered, shaking his umbrella, his hair slightly damp from the rain. His smile faded when he saw the expressions of both women. Am I interrupting something? Sarah discreetly slipped away to the back room, but not without giving Emily a significant look. Since she had met Michael 3 weeks ago, she had become his greatest defender, insisting that love has no age or social class. The landlord wants to double the rent, Emily explained, handing the letter to Michael. It's his elegant way of telling me to find another place. Michael read the document attentively, his expression becoming increasingly serious. "I can talk to him. I have contacts in the real estate sector who—" "No," Emily interrupted him firmly. "I appreciate the intention, but no. Emily, this is absurd. 100% increase isn't reasonable under any standard. I could get a fair deal, or even—" "Buy it yourself," she completed, with a sad smile. "And then what?" "I'd pay a symbolic rent, become your tenant as well as your girlfriend." The word girlfriend floated between them. It was the first time either of them had defined their relationship with such a concrete term. "I just want to help," he said, approaching to take her hands. "Seeing you suffer over something I could solve with a phone call frustrates me." Emily squeezed his hands, grateful for the gesture but remaining firm. "I know, and that moves me more than I can express. But I need to solve this by myself." "Why?" The frustration in his voice was evident. "Out of pride?" "Out of dignity," she corrected. "If I start depending on you to solve my problems, where will it end? Who will I be in this relationship? The girl Michael rescued?" Michael stepped back, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of exasperation. "This isn't about rescuing anyone. It's about supporting someone who matters to me." "There are many forms of support that don't involve using your money or influence," she responded. "You can listen to me, advise me, even help me look for a new location. But if you solve this with your purchasing power, I'll never know if I could have done it myself, and that would change something fundamental between us." A tense silence fell between them, interrupted only by the constant tapping of rain against the shop windows. Finally, Michael nodded, though the tension in his jaw revealed he wasn't completely convinced. "All right, we'll do it your way. What's your plan?" Emily took a deep breath, grateful for his understanding, though it was reluctant. "I don't know yet. Maybe a social media campaign involve the neighborhood. The people of Williamsburg have always been very united, especially when it comes to protecting traditional businesses. If you change your mind about my help, you'll be the first to know," she completed, offering him a smile of peace. For the following 2 weeks, Emily threw herself body and soul into saving her flower shop. With the help of Sarah and other friends from the neighborhood, she organized an online campaign under the slogan, "Save Williamsburg's Flowers." The response was surprising. Neighbors, regular customers, and even tourists who had visited the shop began to donate small amounts. A local artist designed posters that soon appeared in cafes and bars throughout the area. The neighborhood newspaper published an article about the situation, highlighting how real estate speculation was driving out small traditional businesses. Michael observed everything from a respectful distance, offering moral support but containing his impulse to intervene. Each night, Emily called him to tell him the day's progress, how much they had raised, who had joined the cause, the new ideas that were emerging. He listened, offered suggestions when asked, and fought against his instinct to fix the situation. One afternoon, while reviewing documents in his office, he received a call from David. "You should see this," his partner said without preamble. "There's a demonstration in front of your girl's flower shop. It's all over social media." Michael immediately opened his computer and searched for local news. Indeed, more than 200 people had gathered peacefully in front of Bloom and Willow, many with flowers in their hands, forming a human chain around the building. Handmade banners proclaimed, "Williamsburg's flowers don't wilt," and "No to speculation." Among the crowd, he could distinguish Emily, passionately speaking in front of the cameras of a local television station. "She managed to mobilize half the neighborhood," David commented, evidently impressed. "And all without using a single dollar from Thompson Investments. Your girl has guts, Michael." "And determination," he thought, with a mixture of pride and amazement. The woman he saw on the screen, passionately defending the business she loved, was a force of nature. She wasn't the naive young woman that many, including Jessica, had assumed she was. She was a fighter. 3 days later, the landlord announced that he would reconsider the rent increase. A week later, he offered a new contract with an increase of 20%, not 100%, and with a duration of 5 years that guaranteed stability. The victory was bittersweet. The increase was still significant for Emily's tight budget, but it was an indisputable triumph for the community and for her. On the night of signing the new contract, Michael waited for her on the terrace of his Upper East Side apartment with a dinner prepared by a private chef and a bottle of champagne. When Emily arrived, her face shone with a joy that no makeup could replicate. "We did it," she announced, throwing herself into his arms. 5 more years of flowers in Williamsburg. Michael lifted her, spinning with her in an impulse of celebration uncharacteristic of his usual composure. "I'm so proud of you," he said when he gently set her back on the floor. "I never doubted you would succeed." Emily looked at him curiously. "Really? Because I doubted 1,000 times? There were moments when I was about to call you and accept your help. But you didn't." "No, I didn't," she confirmed, and her smile became reflective. "And I think that changed something between us, didn't it?" "In a good way." Michael nodded, understanding perfectly. If he had intervened, there would always have been an imbalance of power between them. She would always have wondered if she could fend for herself, and he would always have wondered if she was with him for what he could offer her materially. "You taught me something important these weeks, Emily," he confessed, while serving the champagne. "That sometimes the hardest way to help someone you love is to do nothing at all." "Someone you love?" she repeated, her eyes suddenly moist. Michael paused, realizing what he had just said. The words had come out naturally, without planning or calculation. For the first time in more than 15 years, he had expressed love without fear of rejection or betrayal. "Yes," he confirmed, surprised by the ease with which the truth now flowed. "Someone I love." They toasted under the New York stars, conscious that they had overcome not only an external crisis, but also a fundamental test for their relationship. What neither could foresee was that the real challenge was yet to come, in the form of a shadow from the past that would return to test every inch of the trust they had built. Le Bernardin restaurant gleamed with its classic elegance under the subdued lights. White linen tablecloths, crystal that captured and multiplied the glow of the candles, waiters who moved with the choreographed precision of experienced dancers. Michael unconsciously adjusted his tie while waiting. He had chosen a discreet table, away from the central bustle, perfect for a conversation he anticipated would be difficult. When he saw her enter, he felt a strange emptiness in his stomach. Amanda Wilson, his ex-wife, was still a beautiful woman at 42. Her black hair fell in perfect waves over her shoulders, and the burgundy dress she wore embraced her figure with studied elegance. What was missing, Michael noticed, was the aura of absolute confidence that had always characterized her. There was something fragile in her way of walking now, a vulnerability he didn't remember ever seeing in her. "Michael," she greeted when the maitre d' led her to the table. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." He stood up, offering a formal kiss on the cheek that was more a courtesy than an affectionate gesture. "Amanda, you look well." A pious lie. Up close, he could see the signs of exhaustion on her face, small wrinkles around her eyes that makeup couldn't disguise, a pallor that spoke of sleepless nights. "Charming liar, as always," she responded with a sad smile, taking a seat. "I look like someone who's hit rock bottom, and we both know it." Michael made a gesture to the sommelier, who approached with the bottle of wine he had previously selected. "Your call was unexpected," he said, as the wine was being poured. "It's been almost 15 years without contact." Amanda took a sip from her glass, as if seeking liquid courage before speaking. "I wouldn't have turned to you if I had another option, believe me." "Are things that bad?" She let out a laugh without humor. "Worse. I'm bankrupt, Michael. Greg's businesses failed one after another. We lost everything, including the house. And then he left with his assistant." Such a predictable cliché that it would be comical if it weren't my life. Greg. The name still provoked an echo of pain, though now distant. Michael's best friend, his original partner, the man with whom Amanda had betrayed him, destroying in a single act his marriage and his most precious friendship. "I'm sorry," Michael said, and was surprised to discover that he was sincere. He felt no satisfaction for her misfortune, only a strange and melancholy compassion. "I don't need your money," she clarified quickly, "or at least not directly. I need your forgiveness, Michael." The declaration caught him completely off guard. Of all the things he expected to hear tonight, that wasn't on the list. "My forgiveness?" Amanda set down her glass and looked at him directly, with an intensity that vaguely reminded him of the woman she had been. "I've spent the last 3 years in therapy, trying to understand why I sabotage everything good in my life, why I betrayed the only man who genuinely loved me. And part of my recovery process is to ask forgiveness from those I've hurt." Michael remained silent, processing what he was hearing. The waiter arrived with the appetizers, creating a necessary pause in the conversation. When they were alone again, Amanda continued, "I don't expect you to forget what I did. I don't even expect you to believe me right now. But I needed to tell you that I'm sorry, that I deeply regret the harm I caused you." Michael's first impulse was to reject that late apology, to protect the grudge he had nurtured for years as a shield against new wounds. But something had changed in him. Emily had changed something in him. "Why now, Amanda? Why after so much time?" She seemed to shrink slightly at the question. "Because I'm trying to rebuild myself from scratch, and I can't do that carrying the weight of all my past mistakes." She paused. "And because I heard you're seeing someone who seems important to you." Michael tensed immediately. "How do you know that?" "New York is a small city in certain circles," she replied. "Your daughter and I coincidentally attended a charity gala a few weeks ago. We didn't speak directly, but I overheard when someone asked her about you and about the flower girl, Jessica." Of course. His daughter had never really overcome the pain of seeing him destroyed after the divorce. For her, Amanda remained the enemy to watch. "Her name is Emily," Michael said, with a firmness that surprised even himself. "And yes, she is important to me." Amanda nodded, with an expression that mixed resignation and something resembling relief. "I'm glad for you, Michael. Truly. No one deserves to be happy more than you." She paused, hesitating before continuing. "Just be careful. The age difference, the difference in worlds. Don't make my mistakes. Don't assume you know what she wants or needs." Michael felt a pang of irritation. Even in her current vulnerability, Amanda couldn't avoid offering unsolicited advice, positioning herself as the voice of experience and wisdom. "Emily and you are nothing alike," he responded, more dryly than he intended. "Don't misunderstand me." Amanda raised her hands in a conciliatory gesture. "I'm not suggesting she's like me, just that love sometimes blinds us, makes us believe that differences don't matter, until one day you wake up and realize that you live in completely different realities." The dinner continued with lighter topics, selectively edited memories of better times, updates about old mutual acquaintances. When they finally said goodbye at the restaurant door, Amanda briefly embraced him. "Do you forgive me?" she whispered against his shoulder. "The Amanda I was. The one who hurt you so badly." Michael separated gently, looking into her eyes. "I'm learning that forgiveness isn't something granted once and forever," he responded. "It's a process, and I think I've taken the first step tonight." She smiled, a genuine smile this time, though tinged with sadness. "Thank you, it's more than I deserve." As Amanda's taxi drove away, Michael remained on the sidewalk, feeling a strange mixture of emotions. It wasn't the closure he had imagined for years in his fantasies of confrontation. It was something more complicated, more human, and he was surprised to discover that the weight he had carried for so long felt a little lighter. That night, returning to his empty apartment, Michael found himself thinking about what Amanda had said about differences. Was he being naive in believing that his relationship with Emily could work long-term? Was he doomed to wake up one day and discover they lived in irreconcilable worlds? Worse still, was he using Emily, her youth and vitality, as a balm for his own wounds? The doubt settled in his mind like a persistent seed, putting down roots that would extend over the following days, threatening the fragile trust that had begun to bloom between them. What Michael couldn't know was that these doubts sown by Amanda would arrive at the worst possible moment, when an unprecedented professional opportunity would force him to make the most important decision of his life. Michael's office buzzed with unusual energy that Thursday afternoon. David paced nervously from side to side, while Jessica reviewed figures on her tablet and the company lawyer examined documents with a concentrated expression. The call from Milan would arrive in exactly 7 minutes, and with it, the possibility of the most ambitious expansion in the history of Thompson Investments. "The Italians are completely decided," David explained, unable to contain his enthusiasm. "The consortium wants us to spearhead the restructuring of the entire luxury hotel sector on the East Coast. The Hamptons, Martha's Vineyard, Cape Cod, the entire coast. It's the project of a lifetime," Jessica added, looking up from her documents. "We would triple the value of the company in less than 5 years." Michael remained unusually silent, contemplating the horizon of New York through the windows of his office. The city that had seen him grow, fail, and be reborn stretched before him like a familiar tapestry that could soon become a distant memory. "There's one detail we haven't discussed yet," he finally said, turning to the small group. "The relocation." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. 2 years in Milan with constant travel throughout the East Coast, Michael continued. "It's not a minor detail." Jessica closed her tablet and approached her father. "Dad, it's the opportunity you've been waiting for since you founded the company. International recognition, the definitive consolidation of Thompson Investments as a European reference, not just American." "I know," he replied, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "and until 6 months ago I would have signed without thinking twice." David and Jessica exchanged glances. It wasn't necessary to name the reason for Michael's sudden change in attitude. "You could fly to New York on weekends," David suggested, trying to sound casual. "Or she could visit you. 2 years pass quickly when you're building an empire." "Emily has her business here," Michael replied. "Her entire life is rooted in this city." Jessica couldn't contain herself any longer. "Dad, with all due respect, you're considering rejecting the opportunity of your life for a 6-month relationship with a girl you barely know." Michael looked at her with an intensity that made Jessica instinctively step back. "I know her well enough to know that she is the first person in 15 years who has made me question whether professional success is the only thing that matters." The conference room phone began to ring, interrupting the growing tension. The moment of decision had arrived. "I need a day," Michael said, to everyone's consternation. "Tell them I need 24 hours to review the final proposal." "But we've already reviewed every—" the lawyer began. 24 hours, Michael repeated, in a tone that admitted no discussion. That afternoon, as the sun began its descent over New York, Michael walked along the High Line. The Atlantic stretched before him like a blue promise, the same sea that bathed the coasts where he could soon be building a new chapter of his life, or perhaps abandoning the most important one. The conversation with Amanda continued to resonate in his mind. "Do you assume you know what she wants or needs?" No, he didn't assume that, and precisely because of that, he was tormented. What right did he have to ask Emily to wait 2 years while he pursued his ambition? Or worse yet, to ask her to abandon everything she had built to follow him. His phone vibrated, a message from Emily. "Just finished a bridal bouquet for an 80-year-old woman getting married for the first time. She says she found the love of her life on a senior citizens tour. It's never too late," she told me. "Dinner tonight." The simplicity of the message, the beauty of the anecdote she shared, made his heart contract painfully. How could he explain to her the crossroads he found himself at? How could he ask her to understand a decision that he himself didn't fully comprehend? That night, in Emily's small apartment, Michael silently observed how she prepared homemade pasta. The tiny kitchen barely had space for 2 people, but she moved with a natural grace, humming a song as she chopped fresh basil. The domesticity of the scene hit him forcefully. It was this simplicity, this authenticity, that he had been seeking without knowing it. "You're unusually quiet," she commented, looking up from the sauce she was stirring. "Tough day at the office?" Michael set down his wineglass and approached her, embracing her from behind. He inhaled the scent of her hair, a mixture of flowers and spices. "I have to tell you something," he finally said. The gravity of his tone made Emily turn off the stove and turn to look at him. "What's happening? You're scaring me." Michael led her to the small sofa in the living room where they sat together. He explained about the Italian proposal, the expansion, what it would mean for his company, and finally, the hardest part, the 2 years in Italy. Emily listened in silence, her large brown eyes fixed on him, absorbing every word without interrupting. When he finished speaking, she simply took his hands in hers. "It's an incredible opportunity," she finally said. "I'm very proud of you." It wasn't the reaction he expected. "Emily, it would mean being separated, or asking you to leave your flower shop, your life here." "I know," she replied, with a calm that contrasted with his inner storm. "And it's a decision that only you can make." "I want us to make it together," he insisted. "This affects both of us." Emily shook her head gently. "No, Michael. This is your company, your dream. It would be unfair for me to influence a decision so important for your professional future. And our future, yours and mine." A sad smile formed on Emily's lips. "If there is a future for us, we'll find a way. And if there isn't, her voice broke slightly, then no decision you make today would change that. Michael drew her to him, embracing her as if he feared she might disappear at any moment. I don't want to lose you, he confessed, his voice a rough whisper against her hair. This isn't about losing me or keeping me, she replied, separating to look into his eyes. It's about being true to yourself, about not regretting in 10 years an opportunity you let pass, or one you took for the wrong reasons. They spent the night awake, talking as never before, about fears, dreams, regrets, about how the decisions we make define who we are, but also about how sometimes love means letting go. When dawn began to filter through the window, bathing the room in a golden light, Michael had made his decision. It wasn't the one he would have made 6 months ago, nor the one anyone who knew him would have predicted. But for the first time in a long time, he felt he was choosing not from fear or ambition, but from the deepest truth of his heart. What Michael couldn't foresee was how this decision would catalyze a series of events that would test the relationship in ways neither of them could imagine, bringing them to the brink of rupture before offering them one last chance at redemption. The news exploded like a bomb in New York's business circles. Michael Thompson, the legendary real estate investor, had rejected the Italian proposal. Rumors multiplied like fireworks in the night, that he had discovered irregularities in the consortium, that he had privileged information about an imminent collapse of the European market, that his health was secretly deteriorating. No one, except his inner circle, knew the true reason. He had chosen love over ambition. In the boardroom of Thompson Investments, Jessica looked at her father as if he were a stranger. "You built this company from nothing," she said, her voice trembling with contained emotion. "You've sacrificed vacations, relationships, even your health, and now you risk everything for her?" Michael remained serene, imperturbable in the face of his daughter's emotional storm. "I'm not risking the company, Jessica. I've simply decided that our expansion will follow another path, one that doesn't require my permanent presence in Italy." "You're blinded!" she finally erupted. "That girl has manipulated you exactly as Amanda did. She's made you believe you're special to her, when the only thing special is your bank account." The silence that followed was dense, charged with tension. When Michael spoke again, his voice was dangerously controlled. "Never compare Emily with Amanda again," he said, "and I suggest you reconsider your position. You're still my daughter and I love you, but I won't allow you to disrespect the woman who has brought light back into my life." Jessica collected her documents with trembling hands. "I'm just trying to protect you." "No, Jessica," he responded with sadness. "You're trying to protect yourself from change, from seeing your father vulnerable again, from accepting that life continues, even after the deepest wounds." She paused at the door, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "When this all blows up in your face, don't say I didn't warn you." The door closed behind her with a dry thud that seemed to resonate throughout the office. Meanwhile, in Williamsburg, Emily was facing her own storms. The news of her relationship with Michael, until then kept relatively discreet, had leaked to the local press. A small article in the society section had quickly become the talk of the neighborhood. "The Florist and the Mogul, the romance that made Manhattan's business elite tremble," read the headline. Curious glances followed her down the street. Regular customers asked barely veiled questions about her millionaire. Even Sarah, her most loyal friend, couldn't resist joking, "You should charge me more." Clearly, you can afford it now. It was exactly what Emily had feared from the beginning, that her identity would be eclipsed, that she would go from being Emily, the florist from Williamsburg, to the girlfriend of businessman Thompson. That afternoon, while arranging a shipment of newly arrived lilies, she heard the shop bell ring. When she looked up, she found herself face to face with Jessica Thompson. "We need to talk," said the woman, without bothering to greet her. Emily put down the flowers and dried her hands on her apron, mentally preparing for the confrontation she had been avoiding for months. "I'm listening." Jessica scanned the shop, evaluating the modest business with critical eyes. "My father rejected the most important deal of his career for you," she finally said. "I want to know what you've done to him." "I haven't done anything," Emily replied, keeping calm. "The decision was his. You didn't ask him to stay? Didn't make him feel guilty for considering leaving?" "Actually," Emily held her gaze without wavering, "I told him to take the opportunity. that we would find a way to make it work. This seemed to momentarily disconcert Jessica. You expect me to believe that? I don't expect anything from you, Jessica. Your opinion of me was formed long before you met me. The older woman approached the counter, her posture slightly less defensive. Do you know what Amanda did to him? Do you know how she destroyed him? Michael has told me everything, Emily responded, and I understand your protection. But I'm not Amanda. I'm not with your father for what he can give me materially. They all say that at the beginning, Jessica repeated, though with less conviction than before. Did you know I rejected his help when I was about to lose this shop? Emily asked. Or that I refused to accept the money you offered me to stay away from him? Jessica had the decency to look momentarily embarrassed. Different tactics, same goal, she murmured. Emily sighed deeply, feeling a sudden fatigue. This circular conversation was going nowhere. Jessica, your father is an adult man who makes his own decisions. If you don't trust his judgment after everything he's built, then the problem is in your perception, not in his choices. You're changing him, Jessica accused. He's not the same anymore. And is that necessarily bad? Emily asked softly. The man you knew, locked in his emotional fortress, distanced from any genuine connection, was he really happy? The question hung between them like a delicate crystal that neither dared to touch. Finally, Jessica picked up her bag. If you really love him as you claim, then think about what's best for him in the long term, not just what seems romantic now. I do that every day, Emily replied. And sometimes the best thing for someone is simply to allow them to be who they truly want to be, without expectations or conditions. When Jessica left, Emily sat on her small stool behind the counter, suddenly exhausted. The last few weeks had been an emotional roller coaster. The joy of knowing Michael had chosen to stay, mixed with the guilt of feeling that somehow she had influenced a decision that could affect his entire career. And now, the added pressure of becoming the center of attention, of being judged by people who didn't know her, of seeing her relationship dissected like a laboratory specimen. Is this what it meant to love someone like Michael Thompson? To give up simplicity, privacy, to be just herself? That night on the terrace of Michael's apartment, under a starry sky that seemed indifferent to human dramas, Emily finally expressed her doubts. Sometimes I wonder if we're deceiving ourselves, she said, as they shared a bottle of wine. If these differences that now seem romantic and interesting won't become abysses with time. Michael observed her in silence, perceiving the weight of the unspoken. Are you saying this because of Jessica? Because of the press? Because of everything, she responded with honesty that hurt. Because of how people look at me now in the neighborhood, how your partners fall silent when I enter a room, how every decision you make now seems to be under scrutiny because of me. None of that matters, he said, taking her hand. What we have is stronger than outside opinions. Emily gently withdrew her hand, needing space to articulate what was truly tormenting her. And what if one day you wake up and regret it? If you look back and see all the opportunities you let pass because of this? She made a vague gesture between them. How could I live knowing I was the reason you didn't reach your full potential? Michael remained silent for a long moment, contemplating the city that stretched below them, a mosaic of lights and shadows. When he finally spoke, his voice had a gravity she had rarely heard. For 20 years I pursued success as if it were oxygen. Every deal closed, every building acquired, every million added to my account was a victory I celebrated in solitude. And every night I returned to an empty house where the echo of my footsteps was my only company. He paused. Until you appeared. And for the first time, I began to question if I had been pursuing the right thing all this time. He approached her, taking her face between his hands with a tenderness that made Emily's eyes moisten. I didn't give up Italy for you. I gave it up because I finally understood that no professional success would fill the emptiness I've felt for years. You simply helped me see it. Tears were freely flowing down Emily's cheeks now, tears of relief, of fear, of an emotion too great to contain. I'm afraid, Michael, she confessed in a whisper. Afraid of not being enough. That one day you'll wake up and realize you need someone from your world, someone who understands your references, who can accompany you to your events without feeling like an imposter. And I'm afraid of going back to being the man I was before I met you, he replied. Cold, calculating, unable to see the beauty in small things. They embraced under the starry New York sky, two souls who had found refuge in each other, conscious of the obstacles that still awaited them, but determined to face them together. What they didn't know was that the greatest test was yet to come, in the form of a revelation that would shake the very foundations of the new life they were trying to build. Rain beat hard against the windows of Michael's office that November afternoon. The leaden sky over New York seemed to reflect the general mood at Thompson Investments after the rejection of the Italian project. Although no one dared to openly question the founder's decision, a current of uncertainty had settled among the employees. Michael was distractedly reviewing documents when David entered without announcement, closing the door behind him with unusual firmness. "We need to talk," he said, his expression so serious that Michael immediately put the papers aside. "Problems with the Boston project?" David shook his head, taking a seat across from his friend. "It's about your father." Time seemed to stop. Michael felt a sudden coldness spreading through his chest. William Thompson, the man who had abandoned his family when Michael was barely 8 years old, was a topic that was never mentioned in that office. "My father is dead," he responded automatically, as he had done for decades. "No, he's not." David slid a folder across the desk. "He lives in Connecticut, and he's been trying to contact you." With slightly trembling hands, Michael opened the folder. Inside were reports from a private investigator, recent photographs of a man in his 70s, returned letters addressed to Michael that had never reached his hands. "How long have you known this?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. 3 days, David replied. "One of our contacts in Greenwich recognized him at a notary's office. He's selling his properties there, apparently to move to New York." Michael stood up abruptly, unable to remain seated. He approached the window, observing how the rain transformed the city into a blurred watercolor. 40 years, he murmured. 40 years of silence, and now he decides he wants to play at being a father. David approached, placing a hand on his friend's shoulder. "You don't have to see him. We can make sure he understands you're not interested." "Why now?" Michael's question seemed directed more at the universe than at his friend. What could he want after so much time? "According to our investigator, he's ill," David responded softly. "Not terminal, but serious enough to make him reevaluate his life." A bitter laugh escaped Michael's lips. Classic. The absent father seeking redemption on his deathbed. "You have no obligation to him," David insisted. "You've built your life without his help. You owe him exactly what he gave you. Nothing." Michael nodded slowly, but a part of him, a part he had repressed for decades, felt a painful curiosity. What would it be like to look him in the face after all these years? What explanation could he offer that would justify abandoning a child and a sick mother? "I need time," he finally said, "to process this." That night, instead of calling Emily as he had planned, Michael drove to his house in the Hamptons, needing the solitude of that minimalist space that reflected the order and control he had always sought in his life. As he poured a glass of whiskey, the memories he had kept buried for so long resurfaced like ghosts. His mother crying in the kitchen, the promises of "Daddy will be back soon," that gradually turned into resignation, the nights waiting by the window for a return that never happened. It was then that he understood a truth that had been hidden even from himself, his inability to trust, his fear of abandonment, his need for absolute control. It all traced back to that first paternal abandonment. Amanda had only confirmed a lesson he had already learned at 8 years old, that those who say they love you can disappear without explanation, leaving behind only unanswered questions and an impossible void to fill. 3 days later, without having yet contacted Emily, who was beginning to worry about his silence, Michael found himself driving to Connecticut. He hadn't told anyone, not even David. He needed to face this ghost alone, without intermediaries or outside expectations. The small cafe by the harbor, where he had agreed to meet William, was an anonymous, neutral place. Michael arrived 30 minutes early, choosing a table from where he could observe the entrance. When he finally saw that grey-haired man enter, with a cane and uncertain steps, he felt a disconcerting mixture of emotions: anger, sadness, curiosity, and, most surprisingly, a flash of compassion. William recognized him immediately, as if the shared genes created an invisible connection. He approached slowly, stopping a few meters from the table. "Michael," he said, his voice breaking with emotion, "you look so much like her, like his mother. His father's first words after 40 years were to remind him of the woman he had abandoned, who had died waiting for explanations that never came. "Sit down," Michael replied, with a deliberately neutral tone. "You have 15 minutes to explain to me why I should listen to you a second longer." The elderly man took a seat with difficulty, his trembling hands holding the cane. "There is no explanation that justifies what I did," he began, with a sincerity Michael hadn't expected. "But I want you to know the truth, even if it makes you hate me more." Over the next hour, the 15 minutes extended without Michael noticing, William narrated a story of cowardice, addiction, and late repentance. How alcoholism had consumed him, how he had fled not because he didn't love them, but because he hated himself too much to believe he deserved to be part of their lives. How he had tried to make contact years later, when he was finally sober, but his ex-wife's family had blocked every attempt, convinced he would cause more harm than good. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," the elderly man finally said. "I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that the man who abandoned you was sick, and that the man you see now has spent 30 years regretting his cowardice every day." Michael remained silent, processing everything he had just heard. He didn't feel the cathartic relief that movies promise after this type of confrontation, nor the vengeful anger he might have anticipated. Just a strange sense of completion, as if a book he had left unfinished for decades had finally revealed its conclusion. "Why now?" he finally asked. William smiled sadly. "Pancreatic cancer. They gave me a year, maybe 2 with treatment. Enough time to try to make peace with my mistakes, not to repair them." He didn't ask for money, not even a second meeting. He just left a letter for Jessica, the granddaughter he had never met, and a small package for Michael, old photographs of his mother that he had kept all these years, along with the letters she had written to him during their brief marriage. "Your mother was an extraordinary woman," he said, rising with effort, "and you are her living portrait, not just physically. She would be proud of the man you've become, Michael. I am, even though I have no right to be." As William walked away, moving slowly along the harbour promenade with his shoulders hunched under the weight of years and remorse, Michael remained seated, contemplating the sea that seemed to absorb all the secrets of the East Coast. He didn't feel the emotional closure he had expected, but something equally valuable: understanding. He understood that he had been repeating patterns, building walls to protect himself from a pain that had defined his entire life. And he understood that if he didn't break that cycle, he was doomed to repeat it, pushing away the only person who had managed to see beyond those defenses. That night, in the hotel in Connecticut where he was staying, he finally called Emily. Her voice sounded worried after days without news from him. "Michael, are you okay?" "I was worried." "I need to see you," he replied, with an urgency that surprised her. "There's something important I need to tell you. Something that might explain why I've been the way I've been all these years." "Where are you?" she asked, confused. "In Connecticut. I'm coming back tomorrow. Can you come to the Hamptons?" "Of course," she responded without hesitation. "I'll be there." As he ended the call, Michael contemplated the old photographs spread out on the hotel bed. His young mother, smiling with a whole life ahead of her. A life that had been cut short too soon, marked by abandonment and illness. "I won't repeat your mistakes," he thought, mentally addressing the ghostly figure of his father. He wouldn't run when things got complicated. He wouldn't abandon those who loved him. And above all, he wouldn't let fear dictate the course of his life ever again. With that resolution in mind, he began to plan the next chapter of his story. A chapter that, for the first time, wouldn't be written from fear or distrust, but from the possibility of redemption and true love. What he couldn't foresee was how this personal revelation would catalyze a much broader transformation, not just in his relationship with Emily, but in the very way he conceived his legacy and purpose in the world. The house in the Hamptons seemed different that afternoon, as if the glass and concrete had absorbed something of the interior transformation of its owner. Emily walked across the terrace with slow steps, processing everything Michael had just told her about his father, about the origins of his deepest fears, about how that early abandonment had shaped every important decision in his life. "Now I understand so many things," she finally said, turning to look at him. "Your need for control, your distrust. It all makes sense." Michael nodded, feeling a strange relief at being completely exposed for the first time. For decades I believed my inability to trust began with Amanda, he confessed. But now I see that she just activated a wound that already existed, one I didn't even know I had. Emily approached, taking his hands in hers. What are you going to do about your father? I don't know, he responded honestly. I can't forgive him, at least not now. But neither can I continue pretending he doesn't exist, that his abandonment didn't affect me. That would be continuing to run away just like him. They stood in silence, contemplating together the sea that stretched before them, infinite and changeable, like the possibilities now opening up. There's something else I've been thinking about, Michael continued, about my legacy, about what I want to leave in this world besides buildings and bank accounts. Emily listened attentively, perceiving that he was about to share something important. I want to create a foundation, he explained with growing enthusiasm, to support small businesses in neighborhoods like Williamsburg, Lower East Side, Harlem, especially those led by women or young entrepreneurs who are fighting against gentrification. Emily's eyes lit up. Michael, that's wonderful. And I want you to be my consultant, he added. No one knows better than you the reality of these small businesses, the daily struggles, the real needs. I don't want it to be charity, but genuine opportunities. The idea had emerged during his return trip from Connecticut as he reflected on what truly mattered. For years, he had accumulated wealth as a form of protection, building a material fortress around his emotional vulnerability. Now, for the first time, he saw money not as a shield, but as a tool to create positive impact. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Michael and Emily toured New York neighborhoods, visiting small businesses, listening to stories of struggle and resistance. At the Union Square Green Market, they met an Ecuadorian family that made artisanal chocolates. In the Lower East Side, a young designer who recycled construction materials to create unique furniture. In Harlem, a cooperative of older women who preserved traditional sewing techniques. The Thompson Fund for Local Business began to take shape with clear criteria: sustainability, community impact, cultural preservation. It wasn't just about injecting capital, but creating mentorships, connections, and visibility for businesses that would otherwise be devoured by large chains or the growing real estate pressure. To Michael's surprise, Jessica joined the project with unexpected enthusiasm. After her initial resistance to everything related to Emily, something had changed in her. After Michael shared the truth about her grandfather, as if that revelation had broken an invisible barrier, allowing her to see with new eyes not just her father, but also the woman who had brought that transformation to their lives. I've never seen you like this, Jessica commented one afternoon as they reviewed applications in the office. So, alive? Michael smiled, surprised by the observation. What do you mean? Before you were efficient, brilliant, relentless in business, she explained, but now there's something more. A passion that goes beyond closing deals or making money. It was true. Michael felt as if he had awakened from a long lethargy. The visits to the neighborhoods, the conversations with merchants and artisans, the informal dinners with Emily, where they debated which projects to support. All of this had given him back a sense of purpose he thought was lost. The turning point came unexpectedly during a company board meeting. David was presenting the results of the last quarter when Michael interrupted him with a proposal that left everyone stunned. I want to allocate 15% of our annual profits to the fund, he announced. And I want it to be an integral part of our corporate identity, not just a parallel initiative. The board members exchanged looks of astonishment. One of the oldest investors, a man known for his financial conservatism, was the first to speak. Michael, I appreciate your philanthropic enthusiasm, but that would significantly impact dividends. The shareholders will receive something more valuable than a few additional percentage points, Michael interrupted. They'll participate in the real transformation of this city, in preserving its soul, not just its buildings. A heated debate ensued with divided opinions. But Michael remained firm, with a conviction that surprised even those who had known him for decades. Finally, it was agreed to implement the proposal gradually, starting with 7% that would progressively increase in the following years. When they left the meeting, Jessica approached her father with an expression that mixed admiration and curiosity. Are you sure about this? She asked. It's a radical change in our strategy. Michael nodded, completely serene. "For the first time in a long time, I'm absolutely sure of something," he replied. "I don't want to be remembered just as the man who built luxury buildings. I want to leave something that truly matters." That night, while sharing the details of the meeting with Emily, on the terrace of his apartment, Michael surprised himself by proposing an idea that had been floating in his mind for weeks. "I was thinking," he began with an unusual hesitation for him. "The house in the Hamptons is too big for one person. And too cold, as you once said." Emily looked at him curiously. "It's a beautiful space, it just needs some life." "Exactly," he smiled. "It needs life. Flowers everywhere, books on the shelves, music, laughter. Maybe 2 people instead of 1. The meaning of his words floated between them like a promise not fully formulated. "Michael," she said softly, "are you asking me to move in with you?" "I'm asking us to consider creating a home together," he replied, taking her hands. "Not my space, not yours. A new one that reflects who we are when we're together." Emily's eyes shone with contained emotion. "It's an important step." "It is," he confirmed, "and for the first time in my life, I'm not afraid to take it." That night they sealed their decision with a kiss that tasted of future, of possibilities, of shared dreams. But neither of them anticipated that, just when everything seemed to be aligning perfectly, they would face the hardest test of their relationship. A test that would question not just their mutual commitment, but also the very transformation that Michael believed he had achieved. December's first rain fell furiously over New York when Michael hurriedly entered New York Presbyterian Hospital. Jessica's message had been brief but alarming. "Dad in emergency. Dangerously high blood pressure. Come quickly." The antiseptic corridors of the hospital seemed endless as he followed a nurse to the intensive care unit. His mind obsessively reviewed the past few days, the long hours at the office finalizing the details of the fund, the tense meetings with skeptical investors, the nights working until dawn. He had ignored the headaches, the occasional tingling in his left arm, attributing it all to passing stress. When he finally reached the room, he found Jessica speaking in a low voice with a doctor. His daughter looked pale, with dark circles under her eyes that revealed hours of vigilance. "Dad," she said, approaching to embrace him, "thank God you're conscious. You gave us a terrible scare." The doctor, a middle-aged man with glasses and a serious expression, explained the situation. A severe hypertensive episode that, fortunately, hadn't developed into a heart attack, but which served as a serious warning. "You need to drastically reduce your stress levels, Mr. Thompson," the specialist concluded, "and follow a rigorous treatment. This is not something to take lightly at your age." Michael nodded, still processing the sudden fragility of his own body. He, who had always prided himself on his physical resistance, on needing barely 5 hours of sleep, on being able to maintain the same frenetic pace as executives 20 years younger. "I called Emily," Jessica informed him when the doctor left. "She was in Brooklyn for something related to the fund. She said she'd take the first taxi." Michael felt a wave of gratitude toward his daughter. The path to accepting Emily had been long and complicated for Jessica, but she finally seemed to have understood how important she was to him. The first 24 hours were critical. Michael remained connected to monitors that constantly registered his vital signs, while doctors adjusted medications and performed additional tests. Jessica took turns with David to never leave him alone for a moment, organizing the most urgent company matters from her phone. Emily arrived as night was falling, soaked by the rain and visibly distressed. Seeing him in that hospital bed, surrounded by cables and machines, her face reflected a fear so pure, so visceral, that Michael felt a pang of guilt for causing her such worry. "I'm fine," he reassured her, extending his hand toward her. "More embarrassed than sick, I assure you." She took his hand, kissing it with a tenderness that made Jessica's eyes, observing the scene from a corner, slightly moisten. "I'm going home to rest a bit," Jessica announced, collecting her coat. "I'll be back in the morning." When they were alone, Emily brought a chair close to the bed, without letting go of Michael's hand. "You scared me," she confessed, her voice broken by emotion. "When Jessica called, I thought—" She stopped, unable to articulate the thought. "I'm not going anywhere," he promised. "At least not until we've had that life together that we're just beginning to plan." She smiled through her tears. "The doctors say you need to rest, reduce stress." Michael nodded, reflecting on the irony of the situation. Just when he had finally found a purpose that transcended simple financial success, his body brutally reminded him of his limitations. The next 36 hours were a testimony to Emily's unconditional love. She didn't leave his side for a moment, rejecting Jessica and David's suggestions that she go rest. She slept in the uncomfortable chair by the bed, read aloud fragments of the books Michael kept on his nightstand, and even softly sang old Broadway tunes her grandmother had taught her. The nurses and doctors who entered the room were invariably captivated by her dedication. "Your girlfriend is extraordinary," an older nurse commented to Michael when Emily had briefly gone out to get coffee. "You can see how much she loves you. It's not something we see every day." It was during the second night in the hospital that the decisive moment occurred. Michael woke up to find Emily uncomfortably asleep in the chair, her hand still entwined with his. He observed her in the dimness of the room, her face peaceful despite the exhaustion, her presence as constant and firm as a fulfilled promise. And then he knew, with a clarity that only near-death experiences can provide, he wanted to spend the rest of his life with this woman. Not just live together, not just share moments. He wanted an absolute commitment, a bond that would transcend even his own residual fears. When they finally discharged him 3 days later, Michael insisted on making a stop before returning home. Emily, who was driving following the doctor's strict instructions for rest, looked at him with surprise when he indicated the address. "Tiffany's? Michael, you're supposed to go straight home to rest." "It'll just be 10 minutes, he promised with a mysterious smile. "There's something important I need to do." Inside the exclusive jewelry store on Fifth Avenue, Michael spoke briefly with the owner, an elegant man with whom he had maintained a relationship for years. Emily waited by the door, confused and slightly concerned about the sudden whim of a man who should be recovering at home. When they finally left, Michael carried a small, elegantly wrapped package. "What is that?" she asked as they returned to the car. "Patience," he responded, with a playful gleam in his eyes that he hadn't shown since before the incident. Upon arriving at the apartment, Michael insisted on sitting on the terrace, despite the light drizzle falling over New York. "The doctors said you need to rest," Emily protested. "The humidity can't be good for you right now." "Some things can't wait," he replied, taking her hands. "These days in the hospital made me understand something fundamental." Emily looked at him expectantly, intuiting that he was about to share something important. "All my life I've been postponing true happiness," Michael continued. "First, because I was building my company. Then because I was protecting myself from pain. Later because I believed I deserved to be alone for my past mistakes." He paused. "But life is too brief and precious to waste on fears." He then took out the small package and opened it, revealing a ring with a solitaire diamond set in white gold. It wasn't ostentatious, but elegantly simple, perfectly aligned with Emily's taste. "This ring belonged to my maternal grandmother," he explained, his voice slightly trembling. "A woman from Virginia who believed that true love was the greatest act of courage possible." Emily's eyes filled with tears as she understood what was happening. "Emily Parker," Michael continued, taking her left hand. "You taught me that love is not a weakness, but the most courageous thing we can do. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of marrying me?" Tears ran freely down Emily's cheeks as she nodded, unable to speak from emotion. When she finally found her voice, what she said surprised Michael completely. "Yes, but with one condition." It wasn't the response he expected after such an emotional proposal. "A condition?" he repeated, disconcerted. "I want you to go to therapy," she said, with a mixture of tenderness and firmness, "to really confront the ghosts of the past, not just for me, but for yourself. I don't want to be your remedy, Michael. I want to be your partner. And partners heal together." The request left him momentarily speechless. Part of him wanted to protest, argue that he had already changed, that his transformation was complete. But deep down he knew she was right. He had begun a journey of self-discovery, but there were still layers of unprocessed pain, residual fears that could poison even the strongest love. "Deal," he finally responded, with a smile that lit up his tired face. "As long as you promise to keep challenging me when I hide behind my walls." They sealed their commitment with a kiss that tasted of promise, of future, of a shared courage that neither would have believed possible when they first met at that gala event just a year ago. What neither could imagine was how this mutual commitment to growth and healing would be tested one last time, not by external forces, but by their own residual fears, on the eve of the culmination of their extraordinary journey together. Exactly 1 year had passed since that first encounter in the grand ballroom. New York gleamed under a surprisingly mild winter sun, as if nature itself wanted to bless the occasion. In a secret corner of the Brooklyn Botanic Garden, a space that Emily had transformed with her floral magic for weeks, the guests began to gather. It wasn't a conventional wedding, neither in location nor in attendees. Among the guests mingled impeccably suited businessmen with neighborhood artisans, multinational executives with florists and market vendors. Jessica, elegant in a champagne-colored dress, received the guests alongside Sarah, Emily's best friend, creating a symbolic bridge between the two worlds that today were definitively uniting. In a small, improvised room among centenarian trees, Michael waited nervously. The last 12 months had been an intense journey of self-discovery. He had fulfilled Emily's condition with more dedication than anyone expected, immersing himself in deep therapy that had unearthed wounds he didn't even know he had. The process had been painful but liberating, finally allowing him to break destructive patterns that had accompanied him for decades. The Thompson Fund for Local Business was now fully established, having already supported more than 50 small businesses in New York. Emily had demonstrated an innate talent for identifying projects with real potential, becoming a respected figure even among the most skeptical executives of the company. The house in the Hamptons, once cold and minimalist, had gradually transformed into a true home. Plants and flowers now filled spaces that once seemed sterile, framed photographs, books carelessly stacked, coffee cups forgotten in unexpected corners, all signs of a shared life, imperfect and authentic. A discreet knock on the door interrupted his reflections. David entered, impeccable in his role as best man. "It's time," he announced, with a smile that mixed affection and pride. "Are you ready?" Michael breathed deeply, adjusting his tie one last time. "More ready than ever in my life." As he walked toward the improvised altar under a canopy of wildflowers, Michael's gaze swept over the attendees. His father was there, in a wheelchair, but with eyes bright with emotion. The last months had brought a gradual rapprochement between them. Not complete forgiveness nor impossible forgetting, but understanding, and perhaps most importantly, the breaking of a cycle of abandonment that had defined generations of Thompson men. Jessica positioned herself beside her father, discreetly taking his hand in a gesture of support that meant more than 1,000 words. The relationship between father and daughter had profoundly transformed during this year, evolving from anxious protection to mutual respect based on shared vulnerability. And then, the music changed, and all eyes turned toward the beginning of the floral path. Emily advanced on the arm of her younger brother, radiant in a simple dress that combined elegance with naturalness, exactly like herself. Between her hands, a bouquet of wildflowers collected that very morning from the gardens of Brooklyn. When their gazes met, time seemed to stop. Michael saw in those brown eyes the same disarming sincerity that had shaken him at that first encounter, when she told him without hesitation that he wore a mask of wounded pride. Only now that mask had completely fallen, replaced by the genuine vulnerability of a man who had finally learned to love without reservations. The ceremony was brief but intensely emotional. When the time came for the vows, Michael took Emily's hands in his, conscious that every person present could see the slight tremor that ran through them. "Emily," he began, with a clear voice that resonated in the expectant silence, "I haven't come to thank you for making me believe in love again. I've come to thank you for showing me that I was always capable of loving. I had simply forgotten how." A moved murmur ran through the audience as he continued. "For years I built fortresses where I should have cultivated gardens. I confused control with security and solitude with independence. You, with your relentless honesty and your open heart, tore down every wall I built, not to invade me but to free me." Emily squeezed his hands, her eyes bright with contained tears. "Today, I promise you not just fidelity and support," Michael continued. "I promise constant growth. I promise that I will never stop working on my own fears and shadows. I promise that when winter comes to our lives, as it inevitably will, I will find a way to keep flourishing with you." When it was Emily's turn, her voice trembled slightly, but her words flowed with the same authenticity that characterized her. "Michael, I came into your life without planning or expectations, only with the certainty that beneath all your layers of protection, there existed a man of extraordinary heart waiting to be rediscovered." She paused. "I promise today not to be your savior, but your partner. I promise to challenge you when you hide behind walls, celebrate you when you show vulnerability, and love you not despite your wounds, but recognizing that they are part of who you are and who we have come to be together." The celebration that followed the ceremony was as eclectic as the relationship itself that it celebrated. Jazz music, mixed with classical compositions, gourmet creations coexisted with New York street food. Executives danced with florists, and Jessica surprised everyone by animatedly sharing stories with Sarah as if they were lifelong friends. As night fell, as stars began to appear over New York, Michael and Emily briefly stepped away from the celebration, seeking a moment of intimacy. From their discreet corner, they contemplated the human mosaic they had created, two worlds intertwining, learning from each other, mutually enriching. "Do you know what's most extraordinary?" Emily commented, resting her head on her now-husband's shoulder. "What?" "That this," she gestured toward the celebration, "is just the beginning. That we have a whole life to keep discovering each other, to face new challenges together, to create something that neither of us could have imagined separately." Michael embraced her, inhaling the perfume of wildflowers that emanated from her hair. "In my previous life before you, I measured success in acquisitions and contracts," he confessed. "Now I measure it in moments like this, perfect in their imperfection, unrepeatable in their beauty. Under the starry New York sky, as music and laughter floated in the air like a promise of futures yet to be written, Michael and Emily sealed their commitment with a kiss that tasted of gratitude, of shared courage, and of that rare form of love that isn't born of need or convenience, but of the profound recognition of another's soul. And so a young florist who entered a grand ballroom with borrowed shoes, and a businessman who had built walls around his heart, discovered together the simplest yet deepest truth, that the most unlikely love is frequently the most authentic, the one that forces us to confront who we truly are, not who we pretend to be. Among the gardens flowering in the middle of the New York winter, between seemingly irreconcilable worlds that had found harmony, a new chapter was beginning. One written not with ink of sacrifice or compromise, but with the joyful freedom of two people who had chosen, against all odds, to flourish together.